Cyndi, I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, so people watching, I want them to know that you are Cyndi Suarez,
I am.
the author of The Power Manual, senior editor of the Nonprofit Quarterly, all-around public intellectual, and goddess of the hood. So I just want to that's how I think of you. And of course, one of my dearest friends. And I'm so glad that I get to introduce you to some of our viewers and they get to see some of your ideas. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. I always like talking to you.
Yes, and I know there's so many interesting, exciting things to talk about. And I think the one to start with is this product that I saw brew for so long that is now out in the world as the Power Manual. And I know that we talked on our podcast actually right around the time it was released. And I'm just curious now that it's been in the world for a while. What is the reception that you've had for this kind of brilliant piece of work that you've put together?
It's been kind of interesting. I think the different ones, I think the one that stands out in my mind right now is I was in London in March doing a talk for the NHS, which is the National Health System, I think. And I think it's like their largest, almost like nonprofit, kind of, so to speak. It fulfills a lot of the needs, social, health, mental. And so they called me in. And it was really interesting to hear how they responded to it because they're outside of the US and seeing the similarities. But I think what stood out to me the most was how, it was a 2-day event. And the first day, people were really, you could almost see how beat down people felt by the system, quote unquote. And these are the leaders of the system. So I was sort of surprised by that. And a mostly white group, actually, just how powerless they felt. And then the second day, after we had gone through some ideas and then played with some of the games, a power game to really help you, because the book is both theory and practice, and the practice focuses on games. So, we did 3 games the next day, and the shift that people made from, like, they were laughing the last day and really excited and had made some shifts just around how they oriented in the system. And so just that shift of powerlessness to powerful was amazing to see because they're my ideas, right? And I think it works for me, but then to see like these people in the system in that short of a time kind of really shift was amazing. And I think one thing that stood out to me, what people kept saying made sense to them, was I must have said in explaining some of the thinking, when people say, well, what about this? And what about that? Like every time people would pose like the scenario that was like, of course, I have no power in this, And then I would say, well, where is your power? And then they would always find a place where there was power. And I would say, well, turn to that. Like, always look for your power. Always look for your power. You have to always reorient. And to them, they said that was the most, because it was so simple and they could do it, but it was such a big shift, And then when they could see the power and focus on it, and they were doing that in their own ways, and those connections between that, I just thought that was really powerful.
Well, it sounds like what happened, for example, in the NHS, right? That people came in with a certain disposition, with a certain stance, and by the time they played with power in a way that you were guiding them to do, they were able to see that they had a different access point than they have been witnessing before. So it seems to be like you're doing something to bring people into a greater awareness of where they do have influence.
Yeah, and it's also really simple. I mean, it's just hearing a different possibility.
Right.
I think in a lot of my work in general, not just in terms of the book, but even in consulting, I find that a lot of the most powerful work now is just questions I will ask. It's not even like lots of heavy lifting with a group. It's really like, well, we need to have a shared strategy. Well, why? Why do you want a shared strategy? And for a lot of people, they've never considered that question before. The idea of multiplicity and why that might be also something to consider. So I think, I find that over and over again, when I talk to groups, it's usually simple questions. And I think they're just world opening. And I try to capture those. What are the things that when you say to someone, or sometimes not saying something in a group, right? So, as a person of color in spaces where, in our sector, people are really going through this whole racial justice, decades long of shifting, right? And so some of us in our age group have been through many iterations of that. So we're not in the same place.
Right.
We're not happy it's happening. We're tired that it's still happening, you know, and so our reactions can be really different. And sometimes I find now not engaging is seen as like, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Because there's this idea that you have to give your time and attention just because some people want that.
Right.
It's like, no.
Right.
Actually, what I actually feel is depleted. Like I actually feel like a little deader when I walk away from certain relationships. And I feel, you know, just buoyed by certain conversations. So I just really try to orient towards that which gives me life. And it takes a lot of practice, but then once you get into the habit, it's hard to shake. And then you get braver, and then you're just like, I can't believe I just did that or said that. You just become, it's a certain faith in the world, you know, a certain faith. I'll give you an example. Actually, I did see that. So recently, Angela Davis was here. She was at the library doing a talk on her, actually, I'm not sure what, so it was at the Copley Library, and it was commemorating the suffragists, the anniversary of the suffragist movement. And she came in and she was introduced that way. And I went with my daughter, who wrote an amazing article on that. And she comes out and her first thing is, and she's very matter of fact. And I feel like with a lot of this stuff, well, you can still say what you have to say without a lot of the charge. So she just said, you know, she wasn't mad or yelling. She was like, you know, it's interesting that I was introduced that way because that was actually the anniversary of white suffragists. You know, she was like, the actual date when all women got to vote was 19. And she gave the date, and it was led by Black women. So just wanted to clarify, right? So she always does this thing. And then what happened was towards the end of the talk, she was taking questions from the audience, and a man got up, a young man of color, and he said, you know, I have a men's group, you know, and he was, you know, part of me, you know, I kind of go, oh, I know this kind of person, right? So we have a men's group, and, you know, he's really righteous, right? And he goes, and we're about to have our first meeting in a few months where we're going to invite our women. And I just want to ask you some advice for how we should invite them in. And the audience went, there was like a gasp, right? And I was like, oh man, how is she going to respond, right? Because it seems pretty, you know, banal what he said, but it was an audience that understood a little bit more. So she goes, and you know, you saw Angela Davis pause, and she said, with a lot of love, she said, did you feel the audience response to what you said? And I was like, whoa. She created this communitas moment. It wasn't shaming. It wasn't defensive. And the man said, I don't understand it. And she, oh, that's good. That's good. And then it was she managed to create this experience. And she said, do you want to know? He goes, I'd like to know what happened. And so she asked some people in the audience, can you tell him what happened? And a few people said, oh, well, you know, why is it your space? How is it your women? Like, what, you know? And he thanked her. And it was this little interaction where the way she responded was so graceful. And it didn't shame. Everyone connected at this heart space. And so things like that. I mean, you know, that was a really important moment because that could have gone so many other ways. Yeah. Where people would have left that space feeling less rather than more.
Right. Right.
But yeah, I think it takes a lot of grace to be able to do something with that energy in a room.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.